Yasas. This is an essay that I wrote called On Guns. A note before beginning. As most of you know by now, I am a Hellenic patriot and nationalist. But as with my essay on immigration, while most of this can be applied generally, some will be geared toward America. Laws are actually quite strict in Greece, so there's little, from my perspective, about which to complain. Guns have existed for several centuries, and unlike other things which can be used as weapons, such as knives, their only purpose is to kill. In the correct hands, however, they can be useful. Hunting, protecting the public, executions, and military engagements are all valid uses for firearms. Those who are absolutely against hunting, and perhaps even those who might tolerate it, often see hunters as people who merely collect trophies. I admit, I was once one of these, as I had never known any. But now, upon meeting several, I have learned that many who hunt do so with great respect for the animal, using it for food, and occasionally as for other things as well. For them, it's never about sport. So naturally, they don't want the animals to suffer. While bows and arrows provide excitement and require greater skill to use accurately, firearms are a sure and quick way to get food on the table and to prevent needless suffering. As for those who do kill only for sport, I believe this should be illegal. If you wish to participate in a sport, go to a shooting range for target practice. Most people don't think of the police as gun-toting fanatics, and rightfully so. Most times, when someone is arrested, he'll go quietly. Some people are a bit more aggressive, and may need to be physically grabbed or brought to the ground, and still others must be shot with a stun gun. But some are far too dangerous to the officers and to the public for any of these solutions to work. These must be shot, and while some of these shootings do lead to deaths, it's important to remember that these are hardened criminals who wouldn't think twice about killing people. In the few cases where the police really do lose control and shoot needlessly, they must be imprisoned, fired, and use all access to firearms. While not exactly the same, I also include security guards in this category. They cannot arrest people, but they do protect them from harm. They can be useful in businesses, banks, and schools. I firmly believe that all schools should have specially trained armed guards at its entrance to protect its students and teachers, along with requiring all to be checked with metal detectors. It has been suggested to me that these officers often see their careers as dead-end jobs, so may not perform adequately. If this should become a problem, those from the military should be hired. After all, it's their job to protect civilians from enemies, both foreign and domestic. As anyone who has read my previous essays knows, I am fully in support of the death penalty for a variety of serious crimes. While many favor lethal injection and the electric chair, both of which can be quite expensive, I prefer hanging and the firing squad for most routine executions. Of course, the latter requires the use of firearms. This is not only cheaper, but quicker and serves well in cases where torture or extra suffering is not necessary. That said, I would not use it for euthanasia, as it's not a painless or peaceful method of killing. The final valid use of firearms is in the military. This is where they are in their most natural element. When at war, the usual objective is to drive back and eliminate the enemy, and guns, along with other specialized equipment, are perfect for this job. They can also be used to protect the nation from illegals, human trafficking, drug smuggling, etc. That said, there are many risks associated with firearms. Mostly, these relate to civilian ownership. As I have stated in several essays, one of the major problems with America is that each state has its own laws. These range from the legal ages for things like drinking alcohol, gambling, driving, etc., to healthcare laws, to requirements for teaching in public schools. I could list many examples of how these can lead to problems, yet none is more tragic than the laws surrounding the acquisition of firearms, certain states do the right thing by requiring prospective gun owners to pass thorough background checks, obtain permits, and so on. They do not approve the sale, much less give the gun to the person before these requirements are met. But in other states, buying a gun is as easy as walking into a store, filling out a 2-page questionnaire, and waiting a few minutes for a phone call to be made and for the weapon to be brought out. There are even some online retailers which sell them with the only requirement being an ID to prove you are of legal age to purchase one. Clearly, this is extremely dangerous. To make matters worse, some states allow set reasonable limits on how many guns someone can buy per month, but others allow someone to buy as many as he wishes. The same thing is true for ammunition. How much hunting can one person do in a month or two? Aside from actual gun clubs, law enforcement, the military, or perhaps actors, there is no reason why any one person needs to have more than 3 guns at once. If you are an instructor and need to have a variety with which to teach, that's fine. But a special permit should be required in those cases to allow you to keep them in your home. If not, they should be locked in your classroom or shooting range. There must also be a limit set on how much ammunition a person can buy during a given period of time. Likewise, there is no reason why civilians need to own assault weapons. These can be a great advantage to the military, where speed can mean the difference between life and death. But the last time I checked, animals weren't mounting an attack against hunters in the woods, nor were the targets at shooting ranges. One person told me that such weapons could be used to kill vermin and hogs, but I am sure that a reasonable alternative exists for the same purpose. The only thing these types of firearms do in the hands of civilians is enable them to kill large amounts of innocent people before they are eventually stopped. Despite what many Americans and their Second Amendment say, I do not believe that owning firearms is a right at all. It's a privilege, one which should require training, and also responsible usage. Furthermore, I believe that all firearms should not only be registered, but should have RFID tags and fingerprint readers installed in them. These tags would contain the name of the owner, the date, where they were purchased, and for what purpose they were bought. So if you say to someone that you're going hunting in the woods, and it can be determined that a shot was fired from your gun in town, the police can easily tell whether it was you or someone else who shot it, and exactly where it was used. Those who are respectable citizens should not mind this, as they do use them responsibly and with good intent. Another suggestion I have heard, with which I agree, is that they should have locks on them, which would be triggered by the police. So if you report a firearm as stolen, they can disable it until it is returned to you. Another solution is to rent them from a shooting range or club. You would register with them and take the gun for a given period of time, explaining why and where you were planning to use it. When you finished, you would return it to them, where it would be safely locked away. There is also a debate about concealed weapons. I believe this should be illegal. If you are a law-abiding citizen, there should be no reason to hide any weapon from anyone in public. For those truly worried about self-defense, there are now bulletproof vests and various forms of body armor available for general purchase. These, along with pepper spray, clubs, stun guns, and the martial arts, should be considered as alternatives to owning and using traditional guns for this purpose. Not every attacker uses a firearm. Many will still argue that the Second Amendment was not meant for hunters, but to prevent a military takeover and to stop invasions. Firstly, I see no evidence of a military takeover in America. They are far too against such things to allow one to take place. Secondly, It's 2013, not 1776. No one is about to invade America. Yes, there may be terrorist attacks, but those are to be handled by the military, not by civilians. There is also no civil war, and neither Canada nor Mexico are about to invade. Again, if either one did, the military would be enough to protect the people. Both the technology and the times have changed since the writing of this amendment. Thankfully, civilians can own bombs, drones, military fighter jets, missiles, or anything of that nature. But the Army can, and many of these guns should be put in the same category. If they really did want to take over the nation, they can easily do so. If you're going to argue for gun rights, at least do so for reasonable things like hunting and self-defense against common criminals. I have deliberately used the term firearms throughout this essay. This is because I make a distinction between firearms and and other guns, such as airsoft guns and airsoft rifles, and even children's toys which may shoot projectiles. I firmly believe that these, along with darts, slingshots, and bows and arrows, should be considered safe and should not require any permits or special paperwork to own or carry, with the exception of a hunter's license for bows and BB guns. Those not specifically designed for children should have a minimum age requirement of 16 years old to purchase, but that's all. These types of weapons are excellent for target practice, games, and even hunting of small animals. They promote hand-eye coordination, concentration, and for some, even relaxation. If it wasn't for hunters, I would restrict civilian ownership to only these. Some might argue that the weapons discussed above could also be used to kill, but it's a bit difficult to hide a bow and arrow or a dart gun, and it takes time to load and shoot one. In conclusion, while there are many uses for firearms, there are also many risks involved with their use and availability. If the law must stand that civilians are allowed to carry and to use them, there needs to be a serious reform of the system, from buying them to using them.